The alarms were deafening, a shrieking red pulse filling the cockpit. My heart, it was steady. I ran through the pre-flight check, my hands moving on pure instinct over the console. A lifetime of training narrowed down to this single moment. Then his voice, panicked and furious, crackled over the comms. "Elena, get out of that cockpit. That's my bird. You're not certified for this." I gripped the throttle, the F-22 thrumming around me, waiting. "Negative, Major," I said, my voice pure ice. "I'm not certified. I'm the evaluator." That moment of impact, it was earned. It started a week earlier, at the formal Family Day reception on base. It was all polished brass and stiff dress uniforms, a sea of blue and polite smiles. I walked in and immediately stood out, still in my practical maintenance squadron flight suit, the small engineering patch on my shoulder feeling like a bullseye. My brother, Major Mark Golden Reed, was exactly where you'd expect him to be. He was the charismatic squadron leader, the family's anointed hero, and he was holding court with the big VIP. This was General Stryker, the head of the entire inspection wing, a man whose opinion could make or break a career. Mark, of course, was all charisma and perfect teeth, schmoozing like his next promotion depended on it. Then Mark spotted me. That brilliant, blinding smile widened, and he waved me over, pulling me right into the conversation, as if he were presenting a curiosity. "Ah, General," he boomed. "This is my little sister, Elena." I could feel Stryker's eyes on my flight suit, his expression unreadable. Mark just laughed, slinging a casual heavy arm over my shoulder. "She's our engine girl. Keeps the birds tidy for us real pilots." One of his buddies, another pilot, chimed in with the punchline. "You're the engine girl, right? Leave the flying to the pilots." The group chuckled, and I just stood there. It was the same laugh I'd heard all my life. The laugh when I fixed Dad's truck engine. The laugh when I aced my thermodynamics final. It was the sound of being patted on the head, of being permanently filed away as smart, but not important. I held my breath, just waiting for the moment to pass. But General Stryker didn't laugh. His eyes narrowed, just slightly, and he looked right at me, past the grease smudge on my cheek. "Captain," he said, his voice flat and clipped. "I wasn't aware you were part of this squadron." My face felt like stone, but inside, my blood ran cold. This wasn't just another family joke. This wasn't Christmas dinner. Mark, in his blinding arrogance, had just publicly dismissed me, a fellow officer, in front of the man who commanded the entire inspection. He hadn't just insulted his sister, he had broken protocol in front of a general. He had no idea. Mark loved the laugh. He had no idea he'd just insulted the only officer on base who held a level 5 test pilot certification, in front of the general who signed her latest evaluation. To understand how I got that helmet in my hands, you have to understand the two lives I was living. I've lived that engine girl moment 1,000 times. It's my permanent role in the family play, the part I'm given in every script. To really get it, you'd have to see one of our Sunday dinners. That's the real stage. My father, Colonel Rhett Cannon Reed, a man who still walks like he's on a parade ground, always sits at the head of the table. His entire identity is built on his legendary career as a pilot. A legacy he sees reflected in only one person: my brother. Last month, for instance, Mark was holding court, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He'd just completed a routine cross-country flight, and you'd have thought he'd won a war single-handedly. "The G-forces were intense, Dad," Mark boasted, "but I held her steady through the storm line. A real pilot's guy." My father was beaming, his eyes alight as he raised his glass. "That's my boy. The tip of the spear. That's a Reed in the cockpit." The pride was so thick you could choke on it, a warm, exclusive light that never, ever seemed to land on me. I waited for a lull, for a gap in the hero worship, and I tried. I really tried to share my own win. I actually had a breakthrough this week, I said, my voice quiet but clear. The chatter died down, politely. I found a critical flaw in the turbine's thrust vectoring. It's an issue with metal fatigue at high temperatures. I kept my voice even. Academic. It's affecting the entire F-22 fleet. We think it's the root cause of the recent groundings. I was talking about something that could save lives, a systemic, catastrophic failure that I had personally uncovered. There was silence. That heavy, polite silence that's so much louder and colder than yelling. Mark just sipped his wine, a bored, blank look on his face. My father, he just smiled that placid, dismissive smile, the one I've seen since I was 6, and he reached over to pat my hand. That's nice, honey. Really smart stuff. He then turned right back to Mark, his focus absolute. Now, son, about your upcoming eval, you just make sure your engine girl here has that jet in top shape, okay? We need you sharp. And just like that, I was small again. My fleet-wide discovery was just smart stuff, a footnote to my real job, polishing my brother's pedestal. What they don't know, what they can't know, is that my greasy flight suit is a costume. I'm not a mechanic. I'm a ghost officer, an aerospace engineer, and a level 5 test pilot. I was deliberately placed in that maintenance squadron under a classified audit, codenamed Operation Black Box. My job isn't to fix engines, it's to evaluate the entire system, from the machinery right up to the man in the cockpit. While Mark is practicing for his parade, I'm in a high-G simulator pushing a next-gen prototype to its absolute breaking point, testing its material stress tolerances until the virtual frame screams. I'm the one who liaises directly with the Pentagon and the jet's manufacturers, the one who flags the uncommanded alpha risk that could send a pilot into an unrecoverable flat spin. I'm not just in the squadron. I'm the one writing the final report on its combat readiness, and by extension, on my brother. Only one person on that base knew my real mission, my direct CO, Wing Commander Bishop. He's a quiet, serious man who doesn't care about last names or charisma. He only cares about the data. After that humiliating Family Day reception, I met him in the secure facility. He wasn't smiling. Wraith, he said, my real call sign. Your audit is what matters. Stryker's inspection is just the cover. He looked at the data I'd been collecting for 6 months, the spreadsheets, the hidden logs. You were right, Bishop said, his voice grim. The golden boy is cutting corners. He pointed to the logs. He's pencil whipping his pre-flight checks, skipping diagnostics. His whole squadron is sloppy, arrogant, and a danger to themselves. Your findings need to be ironclad, Captain. When Stryker sees this, it's all going to come to a head. My family saw a mechanic. My brother saw a glorified assistant, but the Pentagon saw a failsafe. For months, I had documented every protocol breach, every corner cut. Mark thought the inspection was for him. He was wrong. It was for me. After the engine girl comment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. It clicked into place. The familiar sting of being dismissed was still there, but it was overshadowed by a sudden, cold realization. My brother's arrogance wasn't just annoying. It was a threat. It was a direct danger to the base, to the mission, and to the pilots he was supposed to lead. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. My classified audit, Operation Black Box, was no longer just a report on systems efficiency. It was now a case for gross negligence, and I was the primary witness. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to yell or cry or try to finally make him see me. That was the old way. That was the engine girl's way. No, I would use the system. I would use my system. I went straight to the secure terminal, my mind perfectly calm, my fingers moving with deliberate precision. I wasn't emotional. I was methodical. I pulled up my audit file, my eyes scanning lines of code and protocols. I found the one I needed and activated it. Protocol Sierra Echo. It's an obscure flag, one that designates a unit for a Level 1 readiness. Surprise drill, to be executed during a non-standard window of opportunity. And what better window than General Stryker's high-profile inspection? This wasn't a guess. This wasn't revenge. This was data. My data, months of it, predicted with near absolute certainty that Mark's squadron would fail a cold start scramble to intercept test. They were sloppy, overconfident, and slow. They were about to show the entire command structure just how slow they really were. The final step was to make it official. I brought my recommendation to Wing Commander Bishop. I didn't frame it as an accusation. I framed it as a data-driven conclusion, a matter of operational integrity. "Sir, my audit is complete," I said, pointing to the key metrics on the screen. "Major Reed's squadron is showing a 40% failure rate on cold start simulations. Their readiness is catastrophically compromised. I'm recommending a live test during the General's tour." Bishop's face was grim. He looked at the numbers, not at me, which is exactly what I wanted. He nodded. "Once. He won't be able to talk his way out of this one, Captain. The request is approved. Stryker will be in the control tower with me." Mark had spent the week polishing his helmet and practicing his speech for the General. I spent it cross-referencing fuel logs and flight readiness rosters. He was preparing for a parade. I was preparing for a court-martial. I was on the main flight line, just another figure in a flight suit, a clipboard in my hand. I was performing a very public, very mundane check on a hydraulics line, playing my part to perfection. From the tarmac, I could see them up in the control tower, behind the angled glass. The very important person gallery. General Stryker was there, tall and imposing. And beside him, radiating pure, unadulterated pride, was my father, Colonel Cannon Reed. He was there as a distinguished guest, a base legend, but he was really just there for Mark. And Mark was all smiles, pointing things out on the flight line, his gestures broad and confident. The golden boy, showing the General his kingdom. They looked like a king, his heir, and the visiting dignitary. I was just part of the scenery, and then, exactly at 14:30, the alarms went off. The base-wide scramble klaxon blared, a sound designed to jolt you out of your skin. It was the drill. My drill. I saw the panic ripple across the tarmac. In the tower, I saw Mark's head whip around. He grabbed a radio, his smile gone. His voice crackled over the open net, laced with confusion. "Tower, this is Major Reed. This is not on my schedule. What is the threat vector?" Then, the automated voice. "Unidentified aircraft, threat vector 270. "Scramble, scramble!" I saw Mark's pilots, the ones who hadn't snuck off to the reception, come sprinting out of the building. They were a mess. One was fumbling with his helmet. Another was running towards the wrong jet. It was exactly what my data had predicted. Chaos. Their hot interceptor, the F-22 that was supposed to be ready, its pilot was nowhere to be found. Just an empty cockpit, waiting. I dropped the clipboard. It clattered on the concrete, and the sound was like a starting gun. I didn't run. I walked. Every eye was on the panicking pilots, so no one noticed me, the engine girl, until I was at the ladder of the hot jet. A young ground crew chief, bless him, ran over. "Ma'am, Captain, you can't. This is Major Reed's bird." I didn't even look at him. I just grabbed the helmet he was holding, my helmet, and said, "Clear this line, airman, now." My voice wasn't a request. It was an order. He snapped back, his training overriding his confusion. I swung into the cockpit, my body fitting into the seat like a key into a lock. This was my real office. The alarms were even louder inside, a shrieking red pulse. My hands were already moving, flipping switches, my eyes scanning the HUD. Pre-flight check done in 9 seconds. Then his voice, high-pitched and furious, crackled over the comms. Elena, get out of that cockpit. That's my bird. You're not certified for this. The sheer possessive arrogance of it. My bird. The laugh from the reception. The hand pat at dinner. Every single dismissal. It all focused into a single, cold point. I gripped the throttle. Negative, Major, I said, my voice pure ice, broadcast over the entire squadron net. I'm not certified. I'm the evaluator. I slammed the canopy shut. The roar of the engines was the only answer he'd ever get. Up in that tower, I knew a different kind of explosion was happening. I couldn't hear it, but I could picture it. Mark, his face purple, screaming that I wasn't rated. My father, his legend, his legacy, crumbling in front of his eyes, demanding someone stop his daughter, and General Stryker, just holding up a hand. Quiet, Major. I found out later exactly what he said in that deafening silence. Colonel Reed, Major Reed. For the last 6 months, this base has been under a black box audit, run by Captain Elena Wraith Reed. I can just imagine their blank faces. Wraith? She's not an engine girl, Stryker continued, his voice like granite. She's the lead test pilot for the entire Raptor modernization program. And your son's squadron just failed its final exam. I didn't give them time to process. I pushed the throttle to the wall. I didn't do a standard takeoff. I did a Viking takeoff. A full throttle vertical climb, pushing 9 Gs, a maneuver Mark only boasted about. The G-force pressed me into my seat. A familiar, welcome weight. I was pure focus. I saw the target drone, intercepted it in record time, and turned back to the base. I landed the jet, not with Mark's showy flair, but with a perfect, no-nonsense precision. As I taxied, I looked up at the tower. I could see them clearly now. Mark was pale, ashen, his mouth open. And my father, Canon Reed, was speechless. His hand was half raised, frozen in a salute he didn't even know he was giving. My father had spent my entire life teaching me that a Reed belongs in the sky. He just never realized he was talking to the wrong child. I didn't just land the jet. I taxied it directly to the hot pit refueling station. A complex, high-pressure procedure that had to be done with the engines still running. It was a procedure I had noted in my audit that Mark's team had a 90% pencil whip rate. They signed it off without doing it, because it was hard, and Mark valued speed over safety. I went through the checklist, my hands steady, the ground crew moving around me with a new, frantic energy. They weren't confused anymore. They were focused. When the tanks were full and the lines were clear, I finally powered down the engines. The sudden, ringing silence was absolute. I unhooked my helmet, pulling it off and letting the cool air hit my face. The young airman who had tried to stop me was right there, his eyes wide. I handed him the helmet. He didn't just take it. He received it, like it was something sacred. "Ma'am," he whispered. That was the fastest intercept to refuel I've ever seen. I just nodded, unstrapped, and climbed down the ladder. Every single person on that flight line, pilots, crew, staff, stopped what they were doing to watch me walk back to the command building. I didn't look at any of them. The debriefing room was cold. General Stryker was at the head of the table, and Wing Commander Bishop was at his right. They both stood when I entered, and Stryker gestured for me to sit opposite him. I was at the table, and as I sat, I glanced through the small window in the door. I saw them, my father and my brother, standing in the hallway. Their distinguished guest and squadron leader passes were gone. They were just outside. They looked like new recruits waiting to see the principal, stripped of all their swagger, all their borrowed authority. My father, Canon Reed, was pale, his hands clasped behind his back in a rigid, unfamiliar posture of subordination. Mark was just staring at the floor, his face a mask of disbelief. All my life, they had sat at the head of every table, and I was expected to just be grateful for a seat in the corner. Now, they couldn't even get in the room. Stryker didn't waste time. "Captain Reed," he said, his voice flat. "Your audit, codenamed Black Box, is the most thorough piece of operational analysis I have seen in my 30-year career. Your findings of gross negligence, falsified readiness logs, and systemic protocol failure within the 44th Squadron are confirmed, effective immediately." He pressed a button on his desk. "Send him in." Mark was escorted in by a military policeman. He didn't look at me. He just stood at attention, his eyes fixed on Stryker. My father was left in the hall. "Major Reed," Stryker said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're grounded. You are hereby relieved of command, pending a full inquiry into the readiness failures documented by Captain Reed. You will turn over all command materials to Wing Commander Bishop. Dismissed." Mark just said, "Yes, sir." He turned, and for a split second his eyes met mine. I saw nothing there. Not anger. Not remorse. Just a void. Then he was gone. 3 months later, I walked into that same briefing room. But I wasn't in a greasy flight suit. I was wearing my command insignia. The 44th was no longer the Golden Boy Squadron. It had been officially redesignated as the 44th Test and Evaluation Squadron. My new nameplate was on the door. The one that used to read Major M. Reed. Now it said, Commander, 44 Tet-Tes, Captain E. Reed. I had stood in this room so many times, in the back, silent, while Mark ran his sloppy, charismatic briefings. Today, I stood at the front. The pilots in the seats weren't Mark's old crew. They were the best. Engineers, test pilots, and tacticians hand-picked from across the Air Force. They were my team. The feeling in the room. It was electric. It wasn't the false, jovial energy Mark had demanded. It was the quiet, sharp focus of elite professionals. They were looking at me, waiting. They didn't care about my last name. They cared about the data. They cared about the mission. They cared about competence. I started the brief, outlining a new high-G vectoring test I had designed. Halfway through, a pilot raised his hand. "Ma'am?" he said, pausing. "Wraith. Quick question on the new thrust vectoring parameters for Phase 2. My heart didn't leap. It just settled. Wraith, my call sign, the one I earned in the dark, in the simulators, in the classified reports, the name my peers had given me. It wasn't Engine Girl. It wasn't Little Sister. It was my name. This was my new family, one forged in skill, not dysfunction. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't heard from in 3 months. My father. The old familiar knot tried to tighten in my stomach, but it was just a reflex now, a ghost. I opened it. "Elena. We need to talk about Mark's career. He's facing a review board." That was it. "No, I'm sorry. No, I'm proud of you. No, I finally understand. Just, we need to talk about Mark." I saw in that single text every time I had been told to cover for him. Every time my achievements were minimized to make his shallow ones seem brighter. Every time I was expected to be the mechanic for his life. The ledger was full. My debt was paid. My fingers moved over the screen. I didn't type a long, emotional reply. I didn't rage. I just typed the truth. All official inquiries must go through my adjutant. I hit send. Then I silenced the conversation forever. I put the phone down, took a sip of my coffee, and looked out the window of my new office. The sun was setting. On the flight line, my squadron was preparing for a night ops evaluation. My brother thought the sky was his birthright. I just proved it was my office. If you've ever been the expert in a room that refused to listen, share your story below. In this community, we know who the real pilots are.